Okay, my friends, our next step is going to be the mouth. Now, there are a lot of variations possible here. So your pet might have an open mouth, a closed mouth, a side angle view of the mouth, or a front view. They might, you might not even see their mouth. They have so much fur. So I'm going to discuss some possibilities here and give some direction, and then we're gonna get started with the walkthrough on this guy's mouth. So if you have a cat, very simple mouth, typically you will have a line coming from the nose down to the lip. You'll have to take a look at your picture and see what color is that. Is it dark brown? Is it pink? Is it black? Normally it's on the darker side, but take a look, see what's there. As far as the lip goes on the cat, I always like to exaggerate the lip line. If you have a closed mouth for a dog or a cat or another type of animal, this works great. So you can basically just outline the lip with the appropriate color, and if you have fur that's going to kind of come over the lip a bit, that's fine. Go ahead and paint the whole lip, and then you can come over on top of that with some fur to soften it, but it's best to exaggerate it a bit underneath. Okay, if you have an open mouth, you're going to be typically seeing a tongue, some teeth maybe, and some kind of jowl or lots of lip, basically. All right, so taking a look at this doggy as an example, you will have a shadow on the tongue. It's going to be darker. Typically, you're going to mix pink and black to make a kind of pinky gray color for that. You're going to have a medium color somewhere on the tongue, probably a darker pink, and then you might have a highlight somewhere, a nice light pink. Occasionally, you might have a dog with purple tongue. So just take a look at what's there. The purple tongue, you could probably use the pink and the black. If you wanted to add just a little bit of blue, you could. The teeth, normally we simplify and just do pretty much a one color beige off-white type of color. I never want to use just stark white for the teeth. It tends to look unnatural. So I have this off-white color here that I'm going to be using. I might mix a little bit of brown into it if I feel like being fancy to give the teeth a little shadow, just because I have some pretty big teeth here. If it's so tiny that it's not going to be worth it, feel free to simplify. And then looking at the jowls, there's typically 1 to 3 colors in the jowls. There might be some layers of the jowls. Maybe you have speckly jowls with pink, grayish pink, and like darker grays or blacks. So take a look at what's there. And normally the colors that you use on your tongue will be appropriate to use on the jowls as well. So we'll be mixing some tongue and jowl color and getting started. So we're going to start with our medium brush just to mix these colors up. Making sure it's nice and clean, drying it off. And we're going to start with some pink. So I'm going to take some of this pink color, moving it over to the side somewhere. And if you have a large tongue, you definitely want to make sure you make enough of these pinky gray colors. So I'm starting with the dark, so I'm just going to use a little bit because the shadowy bit is quite small. And we're just going to add a very small amount of black into that pink. You want to just start with a teeny bit. You can always add more, but it's pretty much, you can't take the paint out, so start small. So this is a nice gray color here. I'm going for a darker shadow. So I want a dark gray. I'm thinking maybe just a little bit darker here. I'm kind of comparing it to the nose colors. And the shadow in my mouth is about as dark as, well, some of it looks just black and some of it looks like the medium colors. So I'm going somewhere in between those two. All right, so I'm just going to try and wipe most of that off. I'm going to, without rinsing, grab some more pink over here to create my medium pink color. So I just want a little touch of gray in this pink. And I've got some red on my plate. Dog's tongue is nice and deep, so I'm going to add just a small bit of red to deepen the color. Looks good. Sometimes I bring my paintbrush over to my reference photo and just kind of compare colors. So I've got my shadow, I've got my in-between medium color. There is quite a big difference between the two. And finally, I'm at the end of my tongue, I have this nice rich pink red combo. So I'm mixing a little pink and red here. So you might have a similar color blend, maybe a little lighter, a little darker in some instances, depending on the lighting and the color of the tongue. And feel free to simplify, but typically 3 colors on the tongue creates a pretty realistic look without it being too crazy. So because I've got this dark red pink color on my brush, I'm going to start there. And that color is at the very bottom of the tongue. So I'm keeping my medium brush since this is kind of a large tongue here, but if you have a small tongue, feel free to switch brushes. I'm going to exaggerate the space. I'm going to paint just a little bit outside the lines up into the other part of the tongue because I'm going to be doing some blending here. It's a little easier to blend with a little extra paint. So I'm bringing it across the bottom, exaggerating just a bit. Like so. I'm going to wipe most of that paint off on my plate, and without rinsing, I'm going to grab my lighter pink gray color. So I'm going to start right at the bottom where I left off, painting this color on, going right up to that dark pink, okay, like so, and then I'm going to start to blend just by going over, whoop, went out of the line a little bit there, no worries, going over the edge repeatedly. So see how that's softened that up now? Nice and soft. Okay, so I'm taking the light pink up to the rest of the tongue, and I've found to get less texture, I'm going to do nice long strokes. You can outline first if that's helpful. All right, and looking back at my photo, I'm feeling like this dark area at the bottom was just not quite dark enough. So I'm just going to come back in really quick add a second layer. And again, I'm going to blend a little bit. Starting to come a little bit too far up, so I'm grabbing some of the lighter color, rinsed off my brush, grabbed the lighter color, just going to bring it back down a little bit. All right, rinsing off. I'm going to move into my shadow color, and the shadow comes all the way up to the furry bit. Looks like my brush was just a little bit damp, so I'm going to dry them off. And because he's furry here, I'm going to go a little bit over the lines, kind of keeping that furry texture going though. And now we're going to blend. So I'm going to rinse off the brush again, clean it, make sure it's dry, very, very dry. I'm going to grab just a little bit of that lighter color on the brush, but wiping most of it off. So I want most of it dry, and we're just going to soften the edge right on the edge. I'm going to try not to bring it too far into the rest of the tongue, just going right over the tip, maybe drying off the brush here and there. Just want a nice soft blend. And if you need to, go back into your light color, lighten things up. Just keep playing with it until you get a nice soft blend that you're happy with. And I think because the shadow is so dark on this dog, I'm actually going to bring a little bit of black into the top and blend that in. So I just wanted to darken it just a bit, making sure to look at my picture frequently. It's going to be your best guide. Now, up close, this might look a little silly at first, especially without anything else painted. But once we get other things filled in around it, it will start looking pretty awesome. Just getting a little bit more of a blend here, just working it, drying off the brush when I find I have too much dark on it. All right, we're getting close. Okay. Now, as far as texture goes, tongues typically have a little bit of texture going on. I'm not going to add that right now. I am going to just keep it nice and simple. Happy pink tongue. Okay, so moving on to the jowls, we'll save the teeth for last. As you can see here, there are some definitely lighter areas of the jowls, and they're normally separated by darker areas. So you could always simplify, maybe just do one highlight and one shadow, or maybe you've got two on each side. So just take a look at the lines on your canvas that I outlined for you. Take a look at your picture and kind of decide from there which areas are important highlights, which are dark. So we're going to start with dark, and I'm going to use black. I want a lot of contrast here. And there's definitely black around the top here by the teeth, and then there's a nice black line between these two jowl highlights. So looking at my canvas, I'm finding that that area was about here, around this tooth. Doesn't have to be exact, just something along the lines. Pun not intended. Okay. And I can see this little line here, this little stripe is going to be that shadow of the jowl. Okay, so we've got one side, now I'm taking a look at the other side. On this side, there's definitely dark around the teeth again, and kind of in between these two jowl colors. So kind of the same. This looks like it's going to be its teeth because it's closest to the tongue. A little hard to tell here. And this area here. Okay. And there we are. Got the darkest black bit of the mouth. Now we're going to use our dark gray that we made for the tongue, the darkest tongue color. If you need to make a new color because that color doesn't really apply, go ahead, but the colors look very similar to me. So, filling in this jowl bit, pretty much the rest of the jowls, if appropriate, you can fill in with this color here. If you have spots or different color, lots of colors, feel free to adjust. Cool. And on to the other side, we've got, that's a tooth, this is a jowl. Getting a little cheeky with it. And this one on the outside as well. Forget to roll that brush if you need to get that tiny little detail area. You can always kind of make it up a little bit if it's too confusing. almost forgot about this little bit. It's my kitty cat. Okay, so that is the simplified version of the jowls. If you wanted to, you could add a little highlight by using the medium pink for the tongue, or whatever color applies. He's got these little kind of bulbous parts of the jowls where they're kind of textured. Not really sure how else to describe that. But so you can add some little dots of the pink, or little lines of highlights if it's very wet. And if you tried it out and you decide, you don't really like that, just cover it back up, soften it with that pink or that gray. And finally, we are at the teeth. So I'm using this off-white color as my base. I'm going to go ahead, clean off the brush, make sure it's nice and dry, grab some of this color. If you don't have this at home, you can mix a little bit of pink or tiny bit of red, tiny bit of yellow into white. Basically a little orange or brown into your white should create a nice tooth color. Okay, just simply filling it in. If you need to roll that brush to get those tiny little teeth, go for it. Okay. Very nice. If you want to add a little texture, if you have big areas of teeth like I do, I'm going to add just a touch of brown into my off-white. I want to have some contrast here, and I'm just going to kind of outline, pardon me, one side of the teeth. Something like that. That tooth is getting a little gray. Maybe I'll just make that work. Gray and brown. Cool, so that is just, differentiating the different teeth, giving them a little bit more shape. I'm thinking it looks pretty good. Not going to blend too much. And that's about it. If you take a look at it and there's anything that's bothering you, maybe you want to touch up some of the edges. And come back to your tongue and just maybe went over it just a little bit, or the line looks a little strange. Kind of reshape it just a little bit. Whatever suits your fancy. As long as you have your colors, you are good to play with it a little bit. All right. I'm noticing there's just a little bit of shadow down at the bottom here. Gonna just add that in. Wonderful. So with that, we are all done with the mouth. Moving on next, we can start working on the fur. Woohoo!